The night I met Lucas, I wasn't just homeless, I was drowning. The rain poured down in sheets, soaking through my thin jacket and plastering my hair to my face. My shoes were soaked, squelching with every step I took as I ran barefoot through the deserted streets, clutching a tattered bag that held the last remnants of my life. Behind me, shadows moved, men hired by loan sharks who had grown tired of waiting for repayment. My mother and sister had gambled away everything we owned, including what little dignity I'd left, and now their debts were mine to bear. I stumbled into an alleyway, pressing myself against the cold brick wall, praying they wouldn't see me. But the sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing off the wet pavement like thunder. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized there was nowhere left to run. That's when it happened. A blinding flash of headlights illuminated the narrow space, and a sleek black car screeched to a halt mere inches from where I stood frozen. A man stepped out, his silhouette framed by the harsh glow of the streetlights. He was tall, commanding, with sharp features that seemed carved from marble. His gold-rimmed glasses caught the light, making him look almost otherworldly. "Get in," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. I hesitated, unsure if this stranger could be trusted or if he was another predator stalking the night. But then the voices behind me grew closer, accompanied by the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. Without thinking, I lunged into the car, slamming the door shut just as a bullet ricocheted off the hood. Lucas didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed the accelerator, and the car surged forward, leaving my pursuers behind in a blur of rain and darkness. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, trembling, trying to catch my breath. My clothes stuck to my skin, water pooling on the leather seats beneath me. I felt small, insignificant, like a drowned rat plucked from the gutter. And yet, despite everything, there was something about him, an air of quiet authority, a sense of purpose that made me believe, even in my darkest hour, that maybe I wasn't completely lost. "You're Zoe," he said finally, glancing at me briefly before returning his focus to the road. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with such certainty that it sent a shiver down my spine. How did he know my name? Who is this man? Before I could ask, he continued, "I've been watching you for some time now." My stomach dropped. Watching me? What did that mean? Was he one of those obsessive stalkers you read about in horror stories? Or worse, someone sent by my mother and sister to drag me back into the nightmare I tried so desperately to escape? "I'm not here to hurt you," he added, as if reading my thoughts. "In fact, I'm offering you a way out. Marry me, and I'll give you a home, food, money, everything you need. All I ask is that you stay out of my way." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Marriage? To a man I just met? It sounded absurd, impossible. Yet, as I looked out the window at the storm raging outside, I realized I didn't have much of a choice. The alternative, going back to face the people hunting me, was unthinkable. So, with a shaky nod, I agreed. What followed was a whirlwind of events, signing papers in a dimly lit office, moving into a luxurious penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home, and waking up the next morning to find myself alone once again, except this time surrounded by opulence instead of despair. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test my strength, challenge my beliefs, and force me to confront the ghosts of my past. Every fleeting encounter with Lucas felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, his presence was intoxicating, a magnetic force that pulled me into his world of opulence and control. On the other hand, each meeting left me hollow, haunted by an unshakable fear that I would eventually be cast aside like yesterday's news. It wasn't just paranoia. It was survival instinct honed over years of abandonment and betrayal. My mother had taught me well, love is conditional, loyalty is negotiable, and no one stays unless they have something to gain. The short periods we spent together were always tinged with unease. When Lucas returned from his endless business trips, I braced myself for the inevitable storm of emotions relief at seeing him again. Dread of when he'd leave and guilt for craving his attention despite knowing better. Each reunion played out like a carefully choreographed dance, polite smiles, calculated touches, and whispered promises that dissolved as soon as the bedroom door closed behind us. He was a man who thrived on power, and even in intimacy, there was an undercurrent of dominance. Yet, amidst all this, there were moments when his guard slipped, when his eyes softened or his voice faltered, and I caught glimpses of vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. Those rare moments made me question everything. Was he truly indifferent, or was he as trapped in this arrangement as I was? But how could I trust him? Trust anyone? The scars of my past ran too deep, carving fissures into my soul that refused to heal. Nights spent curled up in alleys, dodging loan sharks while my so-called family gambled away our lives. I couldn't escape those memories, no matter how many silk sheets surrounded me now. And then there was Nicole, my sister, whose wheelchair served as a constant reminder of the accident that shattered what little remained of my childhood. Every time I looked at her, I saw Dad's lifeless body slumped over the steering wheel, heard Mom's screams accusing me of ruining everything. How could I open myself fully to Lucas when every fiber of my being screamed to protect myself? Even during our brief encounters, I found myself retreating emotionally, building walls higher than any fortress. Lucas noticed, of course, he noticed everything, but instead of confronting me, he pushed harder, demanding more without understanding why I held back. "You're mine," he'd growl possessively after another round of passion, as if claiming ownership would erase my doubts. But possession wasn't love, and fear wasn't devotion. I wanted to believe he cared for me, but how could I reconcile his tender gestures with the cold reality of our transactional marriage? One evening, after yet another heated argument about my reluctance to have children, I fled to the balcony, gripping the railing until my knuckles turned white. Below me stretched the glittering cityscape, a sea of lights that mirrored the emptiness inside me. Lucas followed, his footsteps deliberate, his shadow looming large against the glass doors. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stood there, two broken souls orbiting each other, but never quite colliding. "You think I'll leave you?" he said finally, breaking the silence. His tone wasn't accusatory, but weary, as though he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I don't think it," I replied bitterly. "I know it. People always leave." He stepped closer, close enough for me to see the faint lines etched around his eyes, lines I'd never noticed before. "Not everyone leaves," he murmured. "Some people fight to stay." For a heartbeat, I almost believed him. Then reality crashed down like a tidal wave. Fight to stay? What did that even mean? Did he expect me to cling to him blindly, ignoring the cracks in our foundation? Or worse, did he think his wealth and power could shield me from the pain of losing him when the time came? That night, as I lay awake, listening to his steady breathing, I realized something terrifying. I didn't hate him. In fact, I might have been falling for him, or at least for the idea of him. But falling for someone like Lucas was dangerous. He was a hurricane wrapped in designer suits, capable of destroying everything in his path. And I, with my fractured heart and tattered dreams, was no match for his intensity. The past 5 years had been a delicate balancing act, a fragile truce between the life I clawed my way into and the toxic remnants of my old one. My mother and sister Nicole were like vultures circling above a battlefield, waiting for me to falter so they could swoop in and pick apart whatever scraps remained. They didn't care that Lucas barely tolerated them. All they saw was his wealth, an endless well they believed they could drain without consequence. Little did they know, or perhaps they simply didn't care, that every attempt to exploit me only tightened the noose around their own necks. It started subtly at first, late night calls filled with guilt tripping, pleas about unpaid medical bills or urgent emergencies that required immediate cash injections. At first, I complied, sending anonymous transfers through intermediaries to avoid drawing attention. But it wasn't enough. Their greed knew no bounds. When direct appeals failed, they escalated. One afternoon, as I sat sipping tea on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, Sandra walked in holding her phone, her usually composed face etched with rare irritation. "Zoe," she said sharply, handing me the device. On the screen was a screenshot from a social media post, accompanied by a photo of me leaving a grocery store wearing sweatpants and messy hair. The caption read, "CEO's wife spotted looking like a homeless woman. What secrets is she hiding?" Below it, hundreds of comments mocked my appearance, speculating wildly about my supposed affair with Lucas's driver. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who posted this? Sandra's jaw tightened. Your darling sister. Nicole had become relentless. Every few weeks, another scandalous rumor would surface online, fake photoshopped images of me partying with strangers, fabricated stories about extravagant shopping sprees funded by stolen company money, even baseless claims that I'd orchestrated Dad's accident to inherit his non-existent fortune. Each post sent ripples through high society, casting doubt on my character and testing Lucas's patience. Yet he never wavered publicly. Privately, though, the tension grew palpable. His sharp glances whenever news broke told me everything I needed to know. How long would his tolerance last? But Nicole's schemes weren't limited to digital harassment. One evening, just as Lucas returned home unexpectedly early, there was a knock at the door. Standing outside was a man in a cheap suit, clutching a folder thick with documents. He introduced himself as Mr. Chun, a private investigator hired by my family to uncover the truth about my marriage. According to him, my mother suspected I was embezzling funds from Lucas and demanded evidence to expose me. Lucas listened silently, his expression unreadable as stone. Then, without warning, he grabbed the folder, flipped through its contents, and let out a low chuckle. "Tell your employer," he said coldly, "that if they wish to dig up dirt, they'll need better material than this." Mr. Chen stammered apologies before scurrying away, but the damage was done. That night, Lucas confronted me. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. I shook my head, heart pounding. There was nothing incriminating in those papers because our marriage truly was what it appeared to be, a transactional arrangement. Still, the incident left me uneasy. How far were they willing to go? What lengths would Nicole stoop to in order to ruin me? Things reached a boiling point when Nicole herself showed up uninvited during one of Sandra's visits. She wheeled herself into the living room, her makeup perfectly applied, her eyes glittering with malice. "Oh, Zoe," she crooned, feigning sweetness. "Imagine my surprise when I heard you've been flaunting yourself at charity events while poor Mom struggles to make ends meet." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Is that true?" "No," I snapped, glaring at Nicole. "She's lying." Nicole smirked, pulling out her phone. "Then why don't we ask the internet?" With a dramatic flourish, she opened a viral thread accusing me of faking illnesses to gain sympathy donations. Sandra gasped audibly, but Lucas merely leaned back in his chair, studying Nicole with detached interest. "You think this affects me?" he said finally, his tone icy. "If anything, it proves how desperate your family is." Nicole's smile faltered. For once, she seemed unsure of herself. But her momentary weakness didn't last long. Before leaving, she whispered menacingly in my ear, "Enjoy your little fantasy world, sister. It won't last forever." Her words haunted me for days afterward. Despite Lucas's reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family's scheming was far from over. Every shadow seemed darker, every noise louder. I began sleeping with my phone under my pillow, terrified of waking up to another scandal or worse, a confrontation I couldn't escape. And yet, amidst the chaos, something shifted inside me. Where once I might have crumbled under pressure, I now found strength. Maybe it was Lucas's unwavering support, or maybe it was the realization that I deserved better than the venomous legacy my family tried to impose on me. Whatever the reason, I resolved to fight back not for revenge, but for survival. Because if there was one thing I learned from marrying Lucas, it was this: power isn't given, it's taken. The sharp pain in my lower abdomen came without warning, like a knife twisting deep inside me. I collapsed onto the gym floor, my body trembling as tears streamed down my face. It wasn't just physical agony, it was fear, raw and suffocating, that clawed at my chest. The pregnancy test results Olivia had handed me earlier still burned in my mind, threatened miscarriage. Avoid strenuous activity. Bed rest required. But how could I possibly stay still when every breath felt like it might shatter the fragile life growing within me? Lucas didn't know yet, I hadn't told him. How could I? For 5 years, I'd been nothing more than his convenient wife, a placeholder until Rita returned. Now, with the wedding of the century looming over us, revealing this secret felt like signing my own death warrant. If Lucas found out about the baby now, would he see it as an obligation rather than a blessing? And what if he discovered the truth about my heart condition, the one I'd hidden for years? A doctor once warned me that childbirth could be fatal given my weak heart, but I chose silence, knowing full well that any sign of vulnerability would strip away whatever tenuous hold I had on Lucas's world. As I lay there, gasping for air, memories flooded back. Nicole mocking me, my mother's cruel words slicing through my soul. And worst of all, the thought of losing the only piece of Lucas I'd ever truly have. "You're pathetic," I whispered to myself, clutching my stomach protectively. My vision blurred, not just from the pain, but from the weight of everything I carried alone. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. Just as I reached for my phone to call Olivia, another message popped up, this time from Nicole. "The company spent a fortune booking Rose Manor. Do you think it has anything to do with you? Good luck, little sister. You'll soon be nothing but a stray dog." Her words hit like a sledgehammer, reigniting the storm of stress that had likely caused this crisis in the first place. I couldn't breathe. Panic clawed at me, threatening to swallow me whole. What kind of mother was I already, endangering my child before they were even born? Every heartbeat echoed louder in my ears, each thud reminding me of the ticking clock above my head. I needed to leave, to run far enough so no one could take my baby from me. But where could I go? With Lucas watching my every move, escaping unnoticed seemed impossible. When I finally managed to drag myself off the floor, I locked myself in the bathroom, clutching the diagnosis paper tightly. Tears soaked the ink, smudging the words into a messy blur. I hated myself for being so weak, for letting fear dictate my choices. Yet, amidst the chaos, a strange resolve began to form. No matter what happened next, I vowed to fight for my baby, for the future I never thought I deserved. That night, as Lucas worked late in his study, I quietly packed a bag, slipping in cash and valuables Sandra had entrusted to me over the years. If I was going to disappear, I needed resources not out of greed, but survival. Before leaving, I placed the signed divorce papers on the bed, hoping it would make things easier for him. He wouldn't need to chase after me or explain why our marriage ended. As long as he got his perfect life with Rita, I reasoned, he wouldn't care about the broken swan who slipped away into the shadows. Yet, as I turned off my phone on the plane, ignoring the endless stream of calls and messages from Lucas, guilt gnawed at me. Was I making the biggest mistake of my life? Or was this the bravest decision I'd ever made? The night before the wedding of the century, Rose Manor buzzed with frenzied activity. Florists arranged endless bouquets of fresh roses. Decorators hung crystal chandeliers that shimmered like stars. And caterers bustled about preparing a feast fit for royalty. Amidst this chaos, I wandered into Lucas's study under the pretense of fetching a book. He promised to show me a collection of rare ballet photographs. But instead of finding the leather-bound tome on his desk, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, a hidden USB drive tucked inside an ornate wooden box. Curiosity gnawed at me, sharp as teeth. What could be so important that Lucas would lock it away in plain sight? My heart pounded as I inserted the drive into his laptop, half expecting alarms to blare or security guards to burst through the door. Instead, silence greeted me until the screen flickered to life, revealing files labeled Project Blackbird. I clicked on one folder, then another, each click unraveling a darker thread of Lucas's past. The documents detailed a car accident from over a decade ago, an accident involving Lucas's father, who had been driving recklessly after a heated argument with Sandra. The crash killed not only him, but also two innocent bystanders. At first glance, it seemed like a tragic twist of fate. But buried deeper within the files were emails exchanged between lawyers and private investigators, hinting at a cover-up orchestrated by none other than Sandra herself. Payments made to witnesses, forged testimonies, and manipulated evidence, all designed to shield her son from scandal. My hands trembled as I scrolled further. Then came the name that froze my blood, Rita Alvarez. She wasn't just Lucas's childhood sweetheart. She was a journalist sent undercover to investigate the truth behind the accident. Every smile, every laugh shared during our brief encounters suddenly felt calculated, predatory even. Was everything she said a lie? Before I could process the magnitude of what I'd uncovered, footsteps echoed outside the door. Panic surged through me as I hastily ejected the USB and shoved it back into its hiding place. Just in time, too, because moments later, Lucas walked in, his expression unreadable beneath the dim light. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice smooth yet edged with suspicion. I couldn't sleep, I stammered, clutching the ballet book tightly to my chest. "You mentioned these photos might help me remember something?" His eyes narrowed slightly, scanning the room before settling on me. For a second, I thought he knew. But then he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You shouldn't be up so late. You'll need your strength tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the vows I wasn't sure I could say anymore. As Lucas turned to leave, I called out softly, "Why did you really choose me?" He paused, his silhouette framed by the soft glow of the desk lamp. When he spoke, his tone carried a weight I hadn't expected. "Because you're the girl I've always wanted to protect, even when I couldn't." His words lingered long after he left, twisting into knots inside my mind. Protect me from what? From himself? From the secrets festering beneath his polished exterior? Or from the ghosts of his family's sins? That night, sleep eluded me entirely. Images of the accident replayed in my head, mingling with memories of Nicole's wheelchair and Dad's lifeless body. Was this why Lucas never spoke of his father? Why Sandra treated me with such maternal affection, almost desperate to keep me close? And Rita, what role did she truly play in all of this? By dawn, resolve hardened within me. If Lucas believed I needed protection, fine. But I wouldn't stand idly by while shadows loomed over us. Whatever truths lay buried, I intended to unearth them, not for revenge, but for clarity. Because love without trust is nothing more than a fragile illusion, easily shattered. The night I decided to leave, the weight of my decision pressed down on me like a storm cloud. My heart raced as I stuffed cash, jewelry, and a few essentials into a small bag. Every sound, the creak of floorboards, the distant hum of traffic felt amplified, as though the universe itself conspired against my escape. I had planned this carefully, booking a last-minute flight under an alias, arranging for Olivia to meet me at the airport, and ensuring that Lucas wouldn't return home until it was too late. But no amount of preparation could shield me from what came next. As I crept toward the door, clutching my stomach protectively, the sharp pain in my abdomen reminded me why I couldn't afford to hesitate. This our baby was all I had left of Lucas now. The thought of losing him burned brighter than any fear of being caught. Yet, just as I reached for the handle, the shrill ring of my phone shattered the silence. It was Nicole. "Where do you think you're going?" Her voice dripped with venom, each word laced with malice. "Did you honestly believe we'd let you walk out with our money? With our family's legacy?" My breath hitched. How did she know? Had someone tipped them off? Before I could respond, another voice joined hers, my mother's. "Zoe," she hissed, her tone cutting through the line like a knife. "If you take one more step, so help me God, I'll make sure you regret it." Their threats should have paralyzed me, but instead they fueled my resolve. Without wasting another second, I disconnected the call and bolted out the door. The elevator ride felt endless, every ding signaling its descent, mocking my desperation. When the doors finally opened, I sprinted toward the parking garage, my heels clicking frantically against the cold concrete floor. That's when I saw them, Nicole in her wheelchair, pushed forward by my mother, blocking the only exit. "You ungrateful wretch." My mother spat, stepping in front of me. Her eyes blazed with fury, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Nicole's armrests. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By stealing from your own flesh and blood?" "I didn't steal anything," I shot back, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Everything I have is because of Lucas, not you. You never cared about me unless there was something to gain." Nicole sneered, wheeling herself closer. "Oh, poor Zoe. Still playing the victim, aren't you? Well, let me remind you of something. Without us, you'd still be nothing. A worthless stray dog begging for scraps." Her words stung, but not enough to stop me. Summoning every ounce of strength, I sidestepped them, heading for the stairwell. But Nicole wasn't about to let me go so easily. With a feral scream, she lunged forward, grabbing my ankle and yanking me backward. I stumbled, crashing painfully onto the ground. The impact jarred my body, sending waves of agony radiating through my lower abdomen. For a moment, panic consumed me. Was the baby okay? "You're not leaving," Nicole snarled, her grip tightening around my leg. My vision blurred as tears welled up, both from the physical pain and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. My mother loomed over me, her face twisted with rage. She raised her hand, slapping me hard across the cheek. The force of the blow sent stars dancing before my eyes, and I tasted copper as my lips split open. "You'll pay for this," she growled, raising her hand again. But before she could strike, headlights flooded the garage, illuminating the scene like a spotlight. A car screeched to a halt mere inches from where we stood, its horn blaring deafeningly. Behind the wheel sat Sandra, her expression fierce and unyielding. "Get away from her," Sandra barked, her voice carrying the authority of a woman who commanded armies of employees. Startled, my mother and Nicole recoiled, their faces pale with shock. Seizing the opportunity, I scrambled to my feet and dove into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut behind me. Sandra peeled out of the garage in reverse, tires squealing as we narrowly avoided colliding with a delivery truck speeding into the lot. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, making my hands shake uncontrollably. Outside, horns blared and tires screeched as chaos erupted in our wake. Sandra gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. "They crossed a line," she said finally, her voice low and dangerous. "No one touches my daughter-in-law, not while I'm alive." Her words brought a strange comfort, even as guilt gnawed at me. I hadn't told Sandra or anyone about the pregnancy. What would happen if Lucas found out? Would he see me as selfish for running away? Or worse, would he blame himself? But those thoughts were quickly drowned out by the realization that danger wasn't far behind. As we sped through the city streets, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw headlights gaining on us. My mother and Nicole weren't giving up. They were chasing us in a black SUV, weaving recklessly between cars. "Hold on," Sandra shouted, accelerating dangerously fast. We swerved around corners, barely missing pedestrians and other vehicles. My stomach churned with nausea, the combination of stress and motion sickness threatening to overwhelm me. Just as I thought we might lose them, the SUV rammed into our bumper, jolting us violently. Sandra cursed under her breath, her foot pressing harder on the gas pedal. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached the airport. Sandra skidded to a stop right outside departures, throwing the car into park. "Go," she urged, shoving me gently toward the terminal. "I'll handle them." With trembling legs, I ran inside, clutching my belly as if sheer willpower could keep my baby safe. Every step felt like a battle, but I refused to look back. Whatever happened next, I vowed to protect this child at any cost. The rain hammered against the windows of the small seaside cabin where I had been hiding for weeks. Outside, waves crashed violently against the jagged rocks, mirroring the storm raging inside me. My hands trembled as I clutched my stomach protectively, each breath shallow and labored. The baby was all that mattered now. Every decision I made, every step I took, revolved around keeping this fragile life safe. But fate has a cruel sense of humor, and it seemed determined to test just how far I would go. It started with a dull ache in my lower abdomen earlier that evening, an ominous warning that something was terribly wrong. Ignoring it wasn't an option. The pain intensified with every passing minute, spreading like wildfire through my body until I could barely stand. Panic surged through me as I realized what was happening. Stress, exhaustion, and fear had pushed my body to its breaking point. I needed help, but calling anyone felt like signing my own death warrant. If Lucas found me now, would he understand why I ran? Or worse, would he blame himself for driving me away? As if on cue, headlights pierced through the darkness outside, illuminating the room in harsh beams of light. My heart stopped. They had found me. Whether it was Nicole's relentless scheming or some unseen force working against us, I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't let them take my child, not without a fight. Summoning the last reserves of strength, I stumbled toward the door, intending to flee into the forest behind the cabin. But before I could reach it, the wood splintered under a brutal kick, and two masked figures stormed in, their silhouettes menacing against the dim glow of the stormy night. One of them grabbed me roughly by the arm, his grip bruising. "Where's the money?" he snarled, shaking me so hard that my vision blurred. "I don't have it," I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "Please, I'm pregnant." "You're hurting the baby." His partner sneered, stepping closer. "That's not our problem. Sandra owes us, and if we can't get it from her, we'll take it out on you." "Sandra? What did she have to do with this?" Before I could process their words, a searing pain shot through my abdomen, forcing me to double over. Darkness crept at the edges of my vision as the world spun uncontrollably. Through the haze, I heard shouting, a familiar voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Get your hands off her!" Lucas roared, appearing in the doorway like an avenging angel. His eyes burned with fury, his suit soaked from the rain, but there was no mistaking the raw determination etched across his face. In one swift motion, he lunged forward, tackling the man holding me to the ground. The other assailant hesitated, clearly unprepared for Lucas's ferocity, but recovered quickly enough to pull out a knife. Time slowed to a crawl. I watched in horror as the blade flashed toward Lucas, who dodged just in time, retaliating with a punch that sent the attacker stumbling backward. Behind him, Sandra appeared, flanked by security guards armed to the teeth. She barked orders, her usually composed demeanor replaced by icy resolve. "Arrest them. Now." The intruders were subdued within seconds, dragged kicking and screaming into the night. But none of that mattered to me anymore. As the adrenaline faded, the weight of my injuries crashed over me like a tidal wave. I collapsed onto the cold floor, clutching my stomach as waves of agony consumed me. Lucas dropped to his knees beside me, his trembling hands brushing hair from my face. "Zoe," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Don't leave me. Please." I wanted to tell him everything, to explain why I ran, to beg forgiveness for doubting him, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I reached for his hand, squeezing it weakly as blackness claimed me. When I woke up hours later in a hospital bed, Lucas was still there, his head resting on the edge of the mattress, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Beside him sat Sandra, her expression soft with worry. Olivia stood nearby, clipboard in hand, explaining something about bed rest and monitoring. But none of that registered fully. All I cared about was the tiny heartbeat echoing through the ultrasound machine, the sound of hope amidst despair. Lucas looked up when he noticed I was awake, relief flooding his features. "You scared me," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I'd lost both of you." "And yet here we are," I replied softly, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Together." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could overcome anything life threw at us. Even the shadows lurking in the corners of our pasts. The storm that had been brewing for months finally broke on a cold December morning. It wasn't just the biting wind rattling the windows of Rose Manor, it was the culmination of years of betrayal, secrets, and unresolved grudges coming to a head. My mother and Nicole, fueled by rage and desperation, stood at the gates of the estate, flanked by lawyers and private investigators they'd hired to expose Lucas's supposed crimes. Their accusations were loud, venomous, and designed to destroy everything I'd built with him. "You think you can keep us out?" My mother screamed, her voice shrill enough to pierce through the chaos. "This is our family's legacy. You stole it from us." Nicole wheeled herself forward, her face twisted into a mask of hatred. "And you," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at me, "you're nothing but a gold-digging parasite. Without us, you'd still be crawling in the gutter." I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't, but because every ounce of strength was focused on keeping myself upright. The sharp pain in my abdomen had returned, more intense than ever, radiating waves of agony that made breathing feel like an impossible task. Olivia hovered nearby, her medical instincts kicking in as she whispered urgently, "Zoe, we need to get you to the hospital. Now." But there was no time. Before anyone could act, Sandra appeared, her presence commanding silence even amidst the pandemonium. She stepped between us, her gaze icy yet unyielding. "Enough," she declared, her voice slicing through the tension like a blade. "If you have grievances, take them up with me. Leave my daughter-in-law alone or face the consequences." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. Then, without warning, Nicole lunged forward, grabbing hold of my wrist with surprising force. "You won't win this," she hissed, her grip tightening until I cried out in pain. That's when Lucas intervened. In one swift motion, he pulled me away from her, his expression darkening with fury. "Touch her again," he growled, his tone low and lethal, "and I'll make sure you regret it." Before the situation could escalate further, a sudden wave of dizziness overwhelmed me. My knees buckled, and I collapsed into Lucas's arms, clutching my stomach as tears streamed down my face. Panic rippled through the crowd as Olivia rushed to my side, shouting orders for someone to call an ambulance. At the hospital, the diagnosis confirmed what we all feared: threatened miscarriage complicated by pre-existing heart conditions. The doctors warned that surgery would be risky, not just for the baby, but for me as well. As I lay there, hooked up to machines and monitors, reality hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about survival. It was about making choices that would define the rest of our lives. Lucas sat beside me, his hand gripping mine tightly. His eyes reflected a storm of emotions: fear, guilt, determination, but beneath it all, I saw something else: love. Pure, unrelenting love. Yet, even in that moment, shadows loomed over us. A board meeting awaited him back at corporate headquarters, where shareholders demanded answers about recent scandals involving his father's past. If he stayed with me, the company risked losing billions. If he left, he might lose me and the baby for good. "Go," I whispered, forcing a weak smile despite the fear clawing at my chest. "Your duty is to your family's empire. I'll be fine." "No," he replied firmly, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. "My duty is to you. To us. Nothing else matters." As if on cue, the door burst open, revealing Sandra. Her usual composure was shattered, replaced by raw emotion. "Lucas," she pleaded, her voice trembling, "the board is threatening to revoke your inheritance unless you attend the meeting immediately. They're ready to replace you with someone else." His jaw tightened, and for a split second, I thought he might hesitate. But then he turned to me, his resolve unwavering. "I choose Zoe," he said simply, looking directly at Sandra. "If the company doesn't understand that, then they can find another heir. And in sacrificing happiness for power." Tears blurred my vision as I reached for his hand, squeezing it weakly. Whatever happened next, I knew we'd face it together. Hours later, after a harrowing surgery that tested every limit of endurance, I woke up to find Lucas slumped in a chair beside my bed, his face pale with exhaustion. Beside him sat Sandra, who smiled softly when she noticed I was awake. "Welcome back," she murmured, her voice filled with relief. And then the faintest sound reached my ears, the soft cry of a newborn baby. Lucas leaned forward, cradling the tiny bundle in his arms, his eyes shining with tears. "It's a girl," he whispered, placing her gently into my waiting arms. "Our miracle." In that moment, surrounded by love and hope, I realized something profound. Life had given me a second chance, not just to heal, but to thrive. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Lucas by my side, I knew we could overcome anything.